Hope had made a decision. At least, she had told herself she had. She was set to marry Carter Walton, a man who had proven to be kind, steady, and reliable. In his arms, she found stability after a tumultuous period in her life, and with Carter, the promise of a new beginning seemed within reach. But no matter how many times she convinced herself that she could move forward, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or rather someone, was missing. Liam Spencer. Liam, her true love, the father of her child, the man who had been there for her through every twist and turn, was always present in the back of her mind. Even when things seemed to be falling into place with Carter, the time they had spent apart from each other during his critical condition had awakened something in Hope's heart that she had tried to suppress for far too long. Liam's brush with death had forced her to face the depth of her emotions for him, something that Carter, for all his good qualities, could never quite replace. The nights Hope had spent by Liam's side as he fought for his life left an indelible mark on her. She had realized that despite her attempts to move forward, the bond between her and Liam could never truly be severed. Every glance, every word exchanged between them reignited the flame that had always existed beneath the surface. As Hope and Carter's wedding date loomed closer, the tension between her heart and her mind grew unbearable. She couldn't deny the way her feelings for Liam were creeping back into the forefront of her thoughts, nor could she dismiss the guilt gnawing at her conscience for not being able to give Carter a clear answer. She knew that Carter had waited patiently, hoping that she would commit fully, but Hope was no longer sure of what she truly wanted. It was not just the specter of her unresolved feelings for Liam that troubled her, it was the weight of the situation, the pressure Carter was subtly applying, and the impending consequences of her indecision. She had come so far in her relationship with Carter, but at what cost? Carter, sensing Hope's hesitancy, began to push harder. He had come to care deeply for her, and he could feel the cracks forming in their relationship. His love for her was genuine, but his insecurity about losing her to Liam had become palpable. Carter knew that Hope was torn, and he was determined not to let her slip away. The thought of Hope choosing Liam over him was a fear that consumed him, so he began pressuring her more aggressively to set a date for their wedding, to make a concrete decision, to stop the endless back and forth. Despite Hope's silence, Carter refused to let her off the hook. He needed her, and he needed to make sure that Liam didn't stand a chance of getting her back. Tensions reached a breaking point when Carter confronted Liam. His jealousy had reached a boiling point, and his desire to put an end to the lingering connection between Hope and Liam was now a personal mission. He sought out Liam, determined to resolve the issue once and for all. His anger burned in his chest as he walked toward Liam, fury coursing through his veins. When Carter arrived at Liam's office, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've had enough, Liam," Carter said, his voice low but filled with an undercurrent of menace. "You need to stay away from Hope. She's moved on, and you need to accept that." Liam, who had already been through enough emotional turmoil over the past few months, stood up from his desk, the words burning his throat. "You don't get to dictate what happens between Hope and me, Carter. We're connected in ways you'll never understand." The heat between them was palpable, thick in the air. The room seemed to shrink as their argument intensified, both men locked in a battle of wills, each unwilling to back down. Carter's eyes narrowed as his temper flared. He took a step forward, chest heaving. "She's mine now. She's agreed to marry me. And you," he pointed a finger at Liam, his voice rising with fury. "You need to stay out of the way." Liam didn't flinch. "You're wrong if you think Hope is yours. She's always going to be a part of my life, Carter. Always." With every word, the tension crackled in the air like electricity. And then, in an explosive moment of pure rage, Carter raised his hand and slapped Liam across the face. The force of the slap sent Liam reeling. He stumbled back, disoriented, crashing into the side of his desk. The suddenness of the attack left him breathless. Blood began to pool in his mouth as he wiped his lip with the back of his hand. The world around him spun as he fought to regain his balance. But Carter, consumed by the fire of his anger, wasn't done. Liam tried to steady himself, but before he could fully recover, Carter was upon him again, landing a second blow. This time, the punch was harder, relentless, and driven by all the pent-up emotion that had built between them. Each strike was fueled by the fear of losing hope, by the desperation to claim her as his own. He hit Liam again and again, each blow sending shockwaves through Liam's body, knocking him further and further into a dazed, half-conscious state. By the time the violence stopped, Liam was crumpled on the floor, barely able to move. His vision blurred, and the pain in his head became overwhelming. Carter, panting with rage, stood over him, chest heaving. He knew he had gone too far, but in that moment, he didn't care. His mind was consumed by the image of hope with Liam, an image that seemed to mock him, to tear away everything he had worked for. As Carter stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the hall, Hope arrived, unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place. She stepped into the office, calling out Liam's name. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw him lying on the floor, his face bruised, his mouth bleeding. "Liam!" Hope cried out, rushing to his side. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she gently shook him, trying to rouse him. But Liam didn't respond. Panic surged within her, and she immediately called for an ambulance, her heart racing. At the hospital, the situation only worsened. The doctors were shocked when they discovered that Liam had suffered more than just bruises. They revealed that he had a hematoma, a blood clot in his brain, and that it would need to be drained immediately before it caused any permanent damage. The news sent shockwaves through Hope, who felt a cold wave of fear wash over her as she realized the severity of what had just happened. As the hours passed, Hope stood by Liam's side, holding his hand, hoping and praying for his recovery. She couldn't believe how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. What had started as a simple argument had led to something far worse, something that threatened Liam's life. Carter, meanwhile, was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. What had begun as an attempt to secure his future with hope had instead spiraled into a tragedy, one that had left a trail of destruction in its wake. His anger, his fear of losing hope, had blinded him to the reality of the situation. Now he had to live with the knowledge that his own violence had nearly cost Liam his life. And as Hope sat by Liam's side, holding on to the hope that he would pull through, she realized that the future she had envisioned with Carter was slipping further and further away. The love she felt for Liam had never truly gone away. And now she was faced with a decision that would change everything. Could she ever truly move on from the man who had always been her heart's anchor, or would she risk everything to build a future with someone else? Hope was torn, but one thing was clear. The love triangle between her, Liam, and Carter was no longer just a matter of emotional conflict. It had become a life-and-death struggle that would leave no one unscathed. The sterile, quiet hum of the hospital's operating room was the only sound as the doctors worked furiously to address the critical condition Liam Spencer found himself in. Hope stood in the waiting room, her heart racing, her mind racing even faster. She had been by Liam's side, shaking him awake, crying out his name as he lay motionless on the floor, his body battered and bruised. She'd never seen him like that before, and the moment she saw his blood, she had known it was serious. The ambulance had come quickly, but not quickly enough to prevent the damage done by Carter's fury. Her heart ached as she waited for any kind of word. The love she had for Liam had never wavered. But in the moment, she had been so caught up in the turmoil with Carter, so unsure of her own heart, that she never imagined things would spiral out of control like this. She had tried to put up walls, to move on, to start fresh with Carter. But she was failing miserably, and Liam's condition, the horrifying realization of how close she had come to losing him forever, made everything feel so much more real. The tension between the two men, their rivalry, their conflict over her, had only grown worse in recent days. And now it had led to Liam's life hanging by a thread. As the minutes stretched into hours, Hope couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice, if she had ever really been able to walk away from Liam. Would she lose him now, not just emotionally, but in the most permanent way possible? The news came suddenly. The doctors emerged from the operating room, their faces grim. Hope's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to them, her voice trembling. "How is he? Is he okay?" One of the surgeons stepped forward, looking regretful. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Spencer," he said, his voice a dull, emotionless monotone. During the procedure to drain the hematoma, Liam experienced severe internal bleeding. "We tried to stabilize him, but he didn't make it." "I'm sorry." He passed on the operating table. Hope felt the world stop. The sound of her breath caught in her throat. "No, no, that can't be true. You're lying." "You can't," her voice broke as she collapsed into a chair, her hands clutching her head as if she could hold the pieces of her life together. The pain, the devastation, hit her like a freight train. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She couldn't process it. Liam gone. Forever. How had it come to this? The pain in her chest was suffocating. The idea that the man she had spent so many years with, the man who was the father of her child, was suddenly gone, just like that, was incomprehensible. It was cruel. It was senseless. And all of it had started because of Carter's rage, his jealousy, his violent outburst. Hope's tears fell freely now, her mind racing through every moment she'd shared with Liam, replaying their good times, their laughter, their love. It was all slipping away in an instant, and she was powerless to stop it. Bill Spencer's reaction was immediate and unforgiving. When he was informed of Liam's death, the anger that surged through him was blinding. This wasn't just about losing a son, this was about justice, and Bill Spencer wasn't someone who took injustice lying down. The idea that someone, anyone, had caused harm to his son, and now had taken his life from him, sent him into a fury that was unstoppable. He had always fought for what was his, and now the person responsible for his son's death was going to pay. Within hours, Bill was mobilizing every ounce of his influence, using every connection he had, every lawyer he knew, to make sure Carter Walton didn't escape the consequences of his actions. No one was going to get away with hurting Liam, not under Bill's watch. Bill was a force to be reckoned with, and anyone who crossed him would feel the full weight of his wrath. The news had spread like wildfire. There were whispers throughout the office, in the tabloids, and across social media. Everyone knew that Carter Walton was the last person to see Liam before the accident, before the altercation that led to the assault. And now, with Liam dead, the evidence, the timeline, and Carter's own outbursts were damning. Hope, devastated and lost, found herself caught in the middle of an unrelenting storm. While she was mourning the loss of the man she had loved so deeply, she was also trapped in the gravity of Carter's actions. She couldn't bring herself to hate him, not entirely, but she couldn't forgive him, either. The man she had tried to build a future with had become the one responsible for Liam's death. Every moment, every word, every touch between her and Carter seemed to haunt her now. The guilt was suffocating. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape the overwhelming weight of her emotions, but she couldn't. She had to face the consequences of what had happened. Carter, in the aftermath of the tragedy, was completely blindsided. He had never, ever intended for things to escalate this far. Yes, he had been angry, irrationally angry, at the thought of losing hope to Liam once again. But the thought that his outburst, his unhinged need to control the situation, had led to something this catastrophic was a crushing blow. When the police arrived to take him into custody for the suspicion of manslaughter, Carter's world collapsed. He never thought it would come to this. He had simply wanted to protect the future he had with Hope. He had wanted to show her that he was the better choice, the better man. But instead, he was being arrested for something he couldn't take back, something that would ruin his life and everything he had worked for. The shock of the arrest, the devastation on his face, was enough to make Hope question everything. She had once believed in Carter, trusted him with her heart, but now? Now, she wasn't sure what was real anymore. Was Carter the man she had believed him to be, or was he the one who, in a fit of jealousy and rage, had ripped everything away from her? As Carter was escorted away in handcuffs, the reality of the situation began to sink in for everyone involved. Hope was left with nothing but her grief for Liam and the bitter taste of betrayal in her mouth. Bill, meanwhile, was preparing for the fight of his life. He wasn't going to rest until Carter paid for what he had done to his son, and he was willing to use every resource at his disposal to ensure Carter was held accountable for the death of Liam. The days that followed were filled with chaos. The press hounded everyone involved. The tabloids ran with every possible angle, stirring up scandal, speculating on Carter's guilt or innocence, and fueling the fires of public opinion. Hope was torn between her grief for Liam and the complicated feelings she still harbored for Carter. She knew she had to move forward somehow, but the loss of Liam had changed everything. She had no idea what the future held, only that it would never be the same. Carter's trial loomed large. The evidence, though circumstantial, painted a picture of a man who had lost control, who had allowed his jealousy and rage to dictate his actions. The emotional toll on everyone involved was immense. Hope's testimony in court, the memories of what had happened between her, Liam, and Carter, would shape the outcome of the trial. As for Carter, he was left to grapple with the reality of his actions, knowing that the road to redemption, if it even existed, would be long and fraught with pain. In the end, nothing would ever bring Liam back. His death was a wound that could never fully heal. For Hope, it was the loss of her first love, the father of her child. For Bill, it was the loss of his son. For Carter, it was the realization that in trying to protect the woman he loved, he had inadvertently destroyed everything.